Lordy, lordy, look who's 40. Hello and welcome to the 40th edition of This Much Is True. 40 days in the desert together, huh? And I mean that because actually the viewership has gone up a little bit. There seems to be 10 to 12 regular views on this. I don't know if they just flick away, but we've gone from kind of the loyal to. So how's it going? How has your Sunday afternoon been? I certainly hope you've enjoyed it. It's been rugby mania here in Ireland, where we won again. Hey, hey. I was actually in that area walking with my lovely wife this afternoon, just outside the stadium. So we got past just ahead of the surge of a queue of people spilling out of the stadium. Sorry about my T-shirt. You see it? It's not a great colour on me. You see where I ruined it? That's bleach. I had a bleachy rag which I threw in the wash with this T-shirt and destroyed it. But I kind of think it's like, I can compensate myself by saying it's like modern art. Yes, just spraying a little bit of CK. Not that who would really do product placement on my channel, huh? With the views that I have. I don't know how you've been, but I want to talk to you about a few things today. The first is, royalty is racism. Oh yes. Don't want to offend any of my English cousins. Keep in mind that I have English blood in me. My grandfather was English. He came from around the south, east of England. I have many relatives, of course, over there. And 2 sisters living there as well. So there you go. Yeah, that's my qualifications before I launch into your, not just your royal family. I'm talking about royalty in general, okay? So royalty is racism. You need to get over any other concept you have of royalty. Royalty is the ultimate form of racism because it basically says, hey pleb, we're something you're not. So lie down there and suck it up. Whether you like it or not, the origins of royalty is not some kind of a blue-blooded creature. You know, it is always the enslavement of others. Yeah, oh, but we brought civilization. Yeah, well, maybe a lot of people didn't want to be civilized in your way. They had their own civilizations, often far more advanced than our Western culture. Yeah, believe it or not, you go back and you look at parts of the world, very sophisticated. Everything from Egypt to around Malaysia to Ceylon, as it was, all that, just, hey, you weren't the only kid in town, but you were the one with the most weapons, the most toys, and you decided to impose it on other people, and hence you are a law unto yourselves, and it's on fools like us plebs that you rich guys build houses or palaces or heliports or whatever. That's the only difference, and let me assure any royalty, not that they're watching, that we are all the same, arse up in the ditch. Whether you're in a pauper's grave or a fucking gold-lined mausoleum, you will get yours. Either way, when your bicycle ramp is face up, right, you're going to be the same as anybody else. And I had this guy, I had to indulge him one time listening to his shite. I was telling me how British he was, how pure British he was, and I had to put him right. And I said, right, tell me, how do you make out that you're pure British? Oh, well, my grandfather was a general going back to the Boston Tea Party. And I said, yeah, bollocks. How does that make you pure British? And he started all this about, well, I can go back so many. I said, here's the story on your pure British, right? So, let me have a word in your shell, Number one, there wasn't any pure British as such. It was an amalgamation of tribes. Yeah, if you go right back before William the Conqueror, you had about 3 main tribes in England, and guess where they came from, funny enough? Yes, Germany. So, if anything, you're probably a German, right? So click your heels and listen up. So you had about 3 tribes. The Jutes. Whatever happened to the Jutes? There's got to be a show there somewhere. The Angles and the Saxons. Yeah, from Saxony. And they were all battling it out for years. And did you know that your country's name, tell me where England comes from. It comes from Angleland, right? It was an area that one of the tribes, the Angles, had. Did you know that, Mr. Pure British? Yes. Just don't be in a hurry to take out the Union Jack waistcoat just yet. I'm not finished with you. All right? So you had essentially German tribes battling it out. Then the Vikings came into the mix as well. So you could be a Viking. William the Conqueror came along and did the first real invasion of the place. So it depends what you want. Do you want to be German or do you want to be French? It's up to you. But you're not pure English, no more than I'm pure Irish. You know, some people just really need to fucking listen before they talk. So he got upset at that anyway. But anyway, tough shit. That's the way it goes. Royalty. Royalty is racism. I was doing a voiceover piece last night, and it involves various countries in the world. And I came to Brunei, and it was like the Sultan of Brunei has 700 Porsches, 70 Lamborghinis, 20 Rolls Royce. All these, he had a lot more than 20 Rolls Royce. I think it was 120. All these ridiculous, lavish, disgusting. I always say that wealth can reach a point where it's ostentatious and it just becomes vulgar. And to see this, to read about this guy and the palace he has is like 255 bathrooms. Who needs that amount of Kazis, huh? Right, let's switch gear and talk about Ricky Gervais, leaving you on the sentence, royalty is racism. Don't you ever think it's anything else. It is racism. It's the ultimate, I'm something and you're not. You know, don't get fooled. Even the British royal family, you only have to go back to the First World War. It was the Coburn-Saxbergs or something. It's a German name. It's Germanic. All right. Of course they changed their name to the Windsors. It wasn't very popular to be going around with a German name in the First World War. So I don't know what you want to make of that. It's certainly not to be insulting to anybody. But I do think when you think about it, royalty is racism. On to Ricky Gervais. Ricky Gervais is one of my favourite comedians. I did mention the other, of course, being who I adore, Steve Coogan. But what I love about Ricky Gervais's work, and I have a lot of time for him, is it's underpinned constantly with humanity. Right from The Office. And who hasn't been involved in little petty squabbles and office politics and office jealousies and all the little office unfairness, all those kind of little biospheres that exist, that used to, not so much anymore now with people working from home and what have you, but that tend to exist in these little office cubicles. Some people spend their whole lives in there. And so it was very, very human. You'd look at the Ricky playing David Brent, the cringe meister, but really wanting to belong, so much so that when the TV crew is there, he thinks this is his chance to be discovered, because he really believes he's something that he isn't. He's an office manager, end of story, but he feels he's a chilled out entertainer, if I remember rightly his description. But all the time he's there and he's clawing to stay relevant, because I think it's a desperation within him. And of course he's trying to suck up all the time to Finchy. Remember Finchy? You know, Finchy, the top sales guy or whatever he was, and he wants to be a lad. But I think Ricky Gervais's finest moment of performance throughout his many successes now is that moment when he says, when the game is up and he says to the office, the senior manager anyway, who's about to sack him, and he says, please don't make me redundant. And this is after all his bluster has been worn out. He knows the game is up. But it's that cry from a very human place, because his character has built up his very identity on the fact that he's a manager within an office environment. He has some semblance of authority, and correspondingly respect. But all these things, when you put it around this massive insecurity, and it's a very human thing, they come to nothing if the rug is pulled from under you, which is what's happening there. And you see his desperation, that really he isn't who he thinks he is. He's very human, but he's very insecure. He adopts this persona because he's desperate to be somebody. And how many of us aren't that way to some degree? We want recognition. We want to think that our lives mean something. I think that was a terrific piece of acting. Take my hat off to him on that. When we come to extras, of course, we see, just what a shitty job an extra is. I've been that soldier. I've also been the blob in the top right-hand corner of a movie starring Colin Farrell called The Lobster. Yeah, I stood around a wet Dublin street and got about 70 quid for that. He was a great guy, by the way, from what I saw. Very nicely, well-behaved and mannerly guy. I had my lunch sitting a few yards from Colin Farrell. That's my claim to fame. I had my chips. It was a bus. It was a converted double-decker bus. Yeah. Actually, when you do see the process of filmmaking, there's nothing glamorous about it. It's horrendously tedious and repetitive. But anyway, he's there trying to as an extra. He has his eye on the prize of being at least a proper speaking role character within a production. And eventually he gets there. And suddenly he gets ideas about himself. And that often happens to people as well. They've been clawing away for years to get somewhere. Suddenly they are there. And at that juncture, you can often tell who's going to be the nice person or the grown-up person and who's going to be the petty little tin god tyrant. And he starts acting up, doesn't he? I think he gets one of the extras fired or something. I don't like the way he spoke to me. Whatever it was. But again, in a very human context. And then, of course, his pièce de la résistance. Is that what it's called? Anyway, his ultimate of achievement is the most brilliant, and again, I think the most watched series ever, certainly on Netflix, and that is Afterlife. He captures in that just what it is like to really be in love with somebody, as well as the whole panoply of lives that he sees around him when he tries to come to terms with the person that he's in love with is no more. Very quickly, I'm going to go in and out of this. My wife took very ill a few years back, and luckily it all came to nothing, but she was in hospital and getting tests, and it just... I'm not trying to be dramatic, but if it's ever happened to you, it was my world ended for 24 hours. I just saw a void. I saw nothing without her. She's been my rock. And the character played by Ricky Gervais has his rock. And I have my phone going bleep. That's all right. Has his rock removed from his life. And then he's literally left flailing about for some meaning. And he finds meaning in other people's lives, in other people's situations. And he starts to think outside of himself. And of course, then you see how small it all is, because his father, I don't know if you've ever dealt with elderly parents and their sicknesses. I have. And it's very human the way, people as well, I think they come to a certain age, especially when they lose everyone around them and they lose meaning. They're happy to go. They're happy to leave. And I think my father was point in case. My father lost his eldest son. I can only imagine what that was like. As well as his wife having dementia. And then there came a point when they both had died and he was left, and it was carers doing their best for him, coming in and coming out. All that kind of strain on someone who was ultimately a very private person. And he wanted to go. He wanted to go. And Ricky's character, I think, wants to go, but tries to do some good around him. Anyway, I love Ricky Gervais. It's the end of the story. I would just say this, though. Some of his material, when it comes to paedophilia, children with cancer, cot deaths, I cannot support him when he tries these kind of mealy-mouthed justifications at the end of his shows. There's no justification for it. It's not good comedy. It's at its best, it's a cheap laugh. At its worst, it's really hurtful to people. And the only way I would couch an argument to him, no doubt he'd come back, he'd have something more wittier to say than I could conceive. But ultimately, I'm human, and I recognise the vast majority of his work is really about tapping into the human condition, and we're all very human. But when it comes to those areas, they're no-go areas. They are taboo areas for very good reasons. For very good reason. People's lives have been upended and totally affected by what happens in the area of paedophilia, children with cancer, and as I said, cot deaths. There is no laughing material in those subjects. And the way I would couch an argument to Ricky is, look, Ricky, you're to be admired for everything you've achieved. Not that he's going to be looking at this. But you've a great love for animals, which he does. If you look at Ricky Gervais, he loves animals. And it is anathema for him to think of cruelty to animals. He's put his money where his mouth and his wallet is. And he's just contributed, I think, over $1 million to animal charities in England. In England. And he's to be, pat him on the back for that any day. But, I've seen him in interviews. He cannot conceive of cruelty to animals. Why can't he not conceive of the cruelty that he inflicts on people whose lives have been turned upside down by cancers and abuse? There's nothing funny in it. I will never agree with that as material. It's cheap. You're bigger than that. And it just isn't funny if you've walked in one morning and your child is dead in its cot. Anyway, enough said. Have a good day. I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, that one, isn't it? Thismuchistrue at protonmail.com. At least like and subscribe. Would that be too much to click that little button to just show that there's another human out there? Or even look if you comments below in YouTube. That would really help. It's grown, I think, from 4 people to maybe 10 or 12 tuning in for however long. I don't know. Won't you take care? Because I care. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.